I think liquidity is actually sometimes a problem. When things go down or when things go bad, the tendency is to hit the panic button and sell. And I think the majority of people buy high and sell low. And that's what ends up happening a lot of times. The nicest thing about real estate is nobody's standing on the corner shouting out what your property's worth every 2 seconds. I think that's a quote from Warren Buffett. And I like that. I don't care what our assets do value-wise up and down. It makes no difference to me. They're backed by solid, predictable cash flow, and I'm getting paid every day. So what difference does it make to me if they're worth this or that? Like I said, the only reason we keep track of it is we want to know what our true equity in that property is. If somebody's willing to overpay for it substantially, go ahead, take it off our books, and we'll go into something else that we think is better. I think sometimes liquidity can be your enemy, is the point of that comment. However, when we started this process back in 2009, we said sometime around the end of 2018, in 10 years, we want to create some liquidity options for investors. I know what it's like. I don't want anybody to feel claustrophobic, like their money's tied up forever. Our options are as follows. We could sell to a real estate investment trust, a publicly traded company. I don't think we'd be able to sell all our assets to one company because we have a lot of different types of assets, but we could take all our industrial properties and sell them to a REIT, and take all our office properties and sell them to a different REIT, and then take our hodgepodgey stuff and peel that off over time, and that could be a potential avenue. The only way I personally would want to do that is if we could exchange our properties for shares in the REIT. And what would happen there is let's say at the time the shares were $75,000. What would happen is we would give them our properties, and your shares would now be worth, say, $150,000. Your yield wouldn't be the same. Your yield would go down. Instead of getting, let's say, 7.5% on $75,000, you'd probably get 3.5% on $150,000, but you'd have the ability to sell and trade in and out of those things in an open market. And so that is a possibility. I don't think it's a probability, but it'll depend how big we are, down the road. Another option is to just sell off individual properties. That's going to depend on where we are in the cycle. I think we'll be in a great position 3 years from now, understanding the real estate cycle. I think we've got a lot of up before we're going to have another down. So I think we'll be in a good position. I think we could sell off individual properties. It does present some problems. I mean, we'd have to sell a property, pay out some money, reduce the distributions, and it would take time to unwind. And again, it wouldn't be my first choice. My first choice is a share buyback, or what I call share facilitation strategy. It'd be a combination of two things. One would be to allow the reserves to buy shares back from people. So maybe we'd allow 5% of owners to tender their shares, and we would buy them back. Now the share price, when we close to new acquisitions, let's say we're at $75,000 by the end of 2018. When we close and we're no longer adding assets, you simply own your percentage of PF3 at that time. So what you're willing to sell that percentage for, in my opinion, would gap up. I don't know by how much, but we would run a calculation and we'd say, you're probably not going to be able to get the same amount, 100% of what you would get if we sold off all the properties, because we have sales costs and it would take time and energy. But it will go up to probably somewhere in the 85 to 90% range, which would represent a very nice return if you were to sell your shares back. That benefits anybody else who wants to stay in. In addition to that program, I think at the same time, we would run some type of what we call a share facilitation program, where if one member wanted to sell, we'd have a list of members that wanted to buy. I just have to check with the attorneys, make sure we're not creating a market and we're not going to be scrutinized by the SEC in some way. But if it's all private and we're not market makers, we don't care if people trade shares amongst themselves. That's probably the most likely initial way to gain liquidity 2.5, 3 years from now. And we're sort of just going through formulas that we think make sense for that. So we're going to address it, and we're going to work harder on trying to figure out what exact liquidity looks like. The reason we don't put it in the documents and we don't want to represent something as concrete is because I certainly don't want to be in a market cycle or in a situation where we said we were going to sell the properties this day and it's the wrong time to sell them. And we don't want to leave that kind of money on the table. So that's a little bit about liquidity. And in the meantime, we're going to continue the long-term wealth accumulation strategy and paying out a decent amount of cash flow. The other thing that happens when we close up the fund is there isn't as much need to carry as big of a reserve anymore, because you have it funded by then. I mean, there should be close to $10 million in the account. There's no reason not to pay out all the extra. Right now, as we continue to add assets, that extra cash on hand helps us with bank financing, helps us bridge gaps between share sales. We get good return on that money, and we can talk about other ways we've done that. In summary, 2015, I think it was a great year. I hope you think it was a great year. I have to thank you guys first and foremost, because you're bold, for putting your trust in me and investing your money with us. I greatly appreciate it. The ProManage team and everybody that we introduced, obviously none of this could happen without them. I hope that comes through in what we're doing, and it doesn't look like it is all about us, because it really isn't. It's about you guys, and we want to do what we can to have fun, help people, and hopefully make a little money along the way.